This week, the Alberta government has finalized new province-wide rules banning sexually explicit content in school libraries, with Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides saying the change is about protecting children, not banning books. Meanwhile, Alberta separatists have filed their official petition to trigger an independence referendum and unveiled a costed fiscal plan predicting a multi-trillion-dollar windfall if the province leaves Canada. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre kicked off the Calgary Stampede this weekend alongside Prime Minister Mark Carney, who was holding high-priced donor events for his Stampede tour. The province is also launching public consultations on small modular nuclear reactors as a long-term power source, particularly for oil sands developments and AI centers. And Christian leaders have launched a 12-city tour aimed at electing municipal candidates who align with biblical values and feel sidelined in an increasingly secular system. All that and more on this week's Alberta Roundup. I'm your host, Isaac Lamoureux, and let's get into that first story right away. Alberta's Education Ministry has finalized new standards to protect children from sexually explicit content in all K-12 school libraries. Under a ministerial order issued Thursday, school boards have until October 1st to remove all materials that contain a detailed and clear depiction of a sexual act, including masturbation, genital contact, and penetration. By January 1st, 2026, boards must also adopt internal policies that restrict access to even non-explicit sexual content for younger students and establish new transparency rules for parents. The provincial government said in a press release, quote, "School libraries should be safe and supportive places where students can learn and explore without being exposed to inappropriate sexual content." Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides emphasized that the changes were not about censorship. He said, quote, "Our actions to ensure that materials in school libraries don't expose children to sexual content were never about banning books. These new standards are to ensure that school boards have clear guidance to ensure age-appropriate access to school library materials while reflecting the values and priorities of Albertans. The rules apply to all public, separate, charter, francophone, and independent schools. They do not apply to classroom-assigned materials, municipal libraries, or religious scriptures." Also, Nicolaides added that the provincial government does not have the direct authority to direct a school board to remove any particular book. The government says the move follows overwhelming public feedback, with an online survey drawing nearly 80,000 responses between May 26th and June 6th. 41% of parents said sexually explicit content should never be available in school libraries, and another 22% said access should be limited to grades 10 to 12. Books with non-explicit sexual content will also face limits. Students in grade 9 or below cannot access them at all, while older students may only do so if the material is developmentally appropriate. LGBT advocate and transgender Blaine Badiuk supported the new rules, saying, quote, "LGBTQ youth, like all children, deserve to see themselves in stories that are age-appropriate, supportive, and affirming, not in material that sexualizes or confuses them." Badiuk added that any claims that this was anti-LGBT legislation distracted from the real needs of youth. Nicole Buchanan, chair of Red Deer Public Schools, echoed that sentiment. She said, quote, "If a passage or image isn't appropriate for the front page of a newspaper or a billboard on the side of the highway, then it shouldn't be available to students in K-12 learning environments." The updated rules come after the province first started pushing back against books containing pornographic imagery in May. The Alberta UCP also blasted the provincial NDP for defending pornographic content in Alberta school libraries. School authorities will be required to list accessible materials, create parental review procedures, and supervise student library access. Full compliance will be phased in over the next 6 months. For our next story, we'll take a look at recent developments in Alberta's bid for separation. The Alberta Prosperity Project filed its long-anticipated referendum petition last Friday, seeking to trigger a province-wide vote on Alberta's independence from Canada. You might have thought that already happened in May, however, the project only filed a placeholder petition back then. The group specifically requested that Elections Alberta hold the application until Bill 54 was officially proclaimed, which just recently happened. As a reminder, the official question previously unveiled was, quote, "Do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada?" Under the newly enacted Bill 54, organizers now have 120 days to collect roughly 176,000 signatures in person, based on 10% of ballots cast in the last provincial election. The rival petition will not be so lucky, as they couldn't hold their nerve. A rival petition from Thomas Lukaszuk, which asks Albertans whether the province should remain in Canada, was submitted prematurely and is subject to a much higher threshold, 293,976 signatures in 90 days. And I know people have cited the 600,000 number, but Elections Alberta confirmed to me that this is the number of signatures required based on 10% of provincial electors on the post-election day list of electors. As you can see from their website, the numbers are right there. However, it does also say that petitions for a constitutional referendum require signatures from 20% of provincial electors, which is 587,952, with the 20% threshold reached in at least 2/3 of electoral divisions. So I guess Lukaszuk's petition is deemed to be a petition for a legislative or policy proposal, which requires signatures from 10% of provincial electors, or as I said, 293,976, which is why it falls under that other threshold. The APP's lawyer, Jeffrey Rath, called Lukaszuk's move a, quote, mischief application designed to confuse voters and said his question isn't suitable for a constitutional referendum. Although based on Election Alberta's definition there, I don't know that it is. Alongside the petition, the APP released a 44-page fiscal plan projecting enormous surpluses and economic gains under independence. According to their modeling, Alberta currently sends $68 to $75 billion to Ottawa each year and receives just $22 to $26 billion back, resulting in a net loss of up to $47 billion. The group claims that a sovereign Alberta could generate $4.71 trillion in revenue by 2045, save $678 billion, and create up to 450,000 new jobs. Some proposed measures include eliminating both provincial income tax and the GST, creating an Alberta dollar backed by oil, gold, and Bitcoin, replacing the RCMP with a provincial police force, transferring $167 billion in CPP assets to form an Alberta pension plan, and adopting a points-based immigration system with automatic deportation for non-citizens convicted of crimes. Based on detailed line item calculations, it estimates an annual surplus ranging from $29.4 billion to $48.3 billion, excluding the one-time setup costs. The plan outlines major one-time startup costs for creating a defense force, border services, and regulatory agencies, which would total up to $5.7 billion. The plan also proposes strict constitutional fiscal rules, including balanced budgets, spending caps, and mandatory referenda before any new taxes can be imposed. The tax reductions proposed would reduce the annual tax rate by up to 46% and save Albertans an average of $18,000 annually. The report, as I briefly mentioned, proposes a points-based immigration system, admitting 18,000 to 27,000 newcomers annually, prioritizing skilled workers in sectors like energy, agriculture, and technology. However, the proposed immigration plan also consisted of a deportation plan that is even stricter than Canada's 2005 Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. It reads, quote, any non-citizen, work permit holder, PR, temporary resident convicted of a criminal offense, like theft, assault, DUI, drug possession, for which the sentence imposed included a jail sentence, faces automatic deportation regardless of sentence length. The total economic activity between 2025 and 2045 is estimated to be around $8.2 trillion.
We're thrilled to host the 16th Annual Canada Strong and Free Regional Conference on September 5th and 6th at the Westin Calgary Airport. Connect with fellow Conservatives to discuss the priorities shaping Western Canada, including resource development, agricultural resilience, trade, and national unity. Plus, we are pleased to be joined by guest speakers such as Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, Conrad Black, and Tristan Hopper. Visit CanadaStrongandFree.network to reserve your tickets now.
The Calgary Stampede also kicked off last Friday, and a headliner like Shania Twain might not have been the biggest name at the event as Canadian politicians flocked to it. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre both made the rounds last weekend. Carney hosted a Stampede-themed Liberal fundraiser downtown where donors must commit at least $1,750 annually to attend. Poilievre held his own barbecue ahead of the August 18th by-election in Battle River Crowfoot in Alberta, where he's aiming to return to Parliament after narrowly losing his seat in Carleton during April's federal election. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith hosted the ceremonial First Flip Pancake Breakfast, joined by Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek and throngs of Stampede goers. Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi told Legacy Media that the Stampede was a, quote, political petting zoo, and he told his caucus to visit all the church pancake breakfasts they could. But despite these claims, Nenshi posted his own video to X, flipping pancakes, the day before the Stampede began. The Stampede runs from July 4th to 13th, so it should be wrapping up here, and political attendance has been high, likely due to Parliament being on its summer recess after sitting for just 20 days following the extended prorogation from the Liberal Party leadership race and general election. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says Alberta is preparing to introduce nuclear power into its energy mix, beginning with public consultations this fall. Speaking at the Calgary Stampede alongside Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Smith said that small modular reactors are a strong fit for Alberta's industrial energy needs, especially the oil sands. She said, quote, "Our oil sands projects are perfect for it. If you can get both the power and steam, power and heat." Ontario already gets 60% of its electricity from nuclear. The province is actually currently building Canada's first grid-connected small modular reactor at Darlington, with 3 more units planned. Smith said the Alberta grid would benefit from modular units that can be prefabricated and shipped to remote industrial sites. She added that Alberta's power demand is set to skyrocket with the expansion of AI data centers and industrial electrification. The province is also backing a proposed Peace River nuclear site, which could host 2 to 4 CANDU reactors with a combined capacity of 4,800 megawatts. That project is currently undergoing a federal review. Parliamentary Secretary for Affordability and Utilities, Chantal DeJong, will host the public consultation sessions later this year. For our last story today, we'll look quickly at something coming up for the municipal elections. A coalition of Alberta Christian leaders is hitting the road for a 12-city, 18-day tour aimed at boosting faith-driven candidates in the upcoming October 30th municipal elections. The Alberta Christian Municipal Rally kicked off last weekend in Westlock and will run through cities like Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, and Lethbridge. Organizers include former MPs, mayors, school trustees, and leaders from groups like the Wilberforce Project and Parents for Choice in Education. Former MP Stockwell Day and key political strategists like Cam Wilson and John Hilton O'Brien are among the speakers. The tour is led by Michael Clark, head of the Christian Impact Network. Clark, who previously sought the federal Liberal leadership, told True North, quote, "Instead of just whining about all the problems, it's time for Christians to take responsibility and be part of the solution. This is our turn on the earth." The rallies aim to encourage Christians to run for office or support candidates who reflect biblical values. Clark added that many Christian candidates feel alone and intimidated by today's political culture. He said, quote, "When Christian politicians step out of line with the woke mob, they're often attacked. This is happening across the country. I want them to find courage when they see many others running with them across Alberta. I also hope this gives a gentle push to the Christian couch potatoes to stop spectating and start participating." Well, that wraps up this week's Alberta Roundup. My name's Isaac Lamoureux. Have a great weekend. Thank you, and God bless.